Greetings. In this segment of Finding the Hidden God, we'll hear clips of Lon Solomon's journey from being a Jewish atheist to a Christian pastor of McLean Bible Church. McLean Bible Church, under Lon Solomon's tenure, grew from a modest-sized church of 200 people to one of the largest megachurches in America. Some years ago, a total of 20,000 people were in attendance at the worship services during one Easter weekend. So here's Lon Solomon in his own words, reflecting on his first step to becoming a Christian.
Well, good evening, good evening. Hey, I don't know if you ever had this happen to you, but have you ever been like walking along or something and all of a sudden kind of like the most unbelievably overwhelming thought kind of hit you? I mean, it hit you so hard that you kind of just ended up standing back and going, wow, that's awesome. You ever have one of those? Well, I had one back in 1965. I've had a couple since, but I had one back in 1965. In 1965, I was a 16-year-old Jewish high school student, and I'll save you the trouble, that makes me 54 today. And I'd made up my mind I wanted to be a scientist, and I had the opportunity to go to a 6-week summer science program run by the National Science Foundation at Virginia Tech. And so we were there, and in the afternoons we worked on individual research projects with professors, and in the morning we all studied a subject. And it just so happened that that summer the subject we all studied was enzymes. Now, I know a lot about enzymes after studying them for 6 weeks, and here's what I learned, a little bit of it. Enzymes are small protein molecules inside of your body that run around helping chemical reactions go faster. You say, well, how important are these enzymes? Well, they're pretty important. I mean, you remember that hamburger you had last Thursday? You would be trying tonight. You'd still be trying to digest it if it wasn't for enzymes in your body. Friends, without enzymes, not only could we not digest food, we could not walk, we couldn't breathe, we couldn't talk, we couldn't see. Every chemical reaction in your body is made possible by these enzymes, and there are thousands of them. And the interesting thing about them is that they are code specific. And what we mean by that is that every enzyme is coded to do only one job. And if that enzyme's missing, every other enzyme in your body doesn't pick up for it. You know, if they say, well, George enzyme isn't here today, so we're just going to do his job. No, it doesn't work that way. You know, if George is missing, nobody picks up and does his job. I mean, enzymes have a union contract, if you understand what I'm saying. And nobody does anybody else's work. And there are some awful sick people in our world today who are missing one enzyme out of thousands. There are some dead people in our world today who didn't have one enzyme out of thousands. And it's an amazing system that God has set up in your body and my body. Now, I remember learning all of this, and one day walking across the campus at noontime back to my dorm for lunch, and I remember it was a bright sunny day, and I walked up to the steps of my dorm, and I stood there, and I remember saying out loud, there has got to be a God. There has got to be a God. Now, friends, I had never read the Bible in my life. I'd never been to church in my life. I'd never had anybody tell me about this God in my life. What convinced me that there had to be a God was not that I'd read the Bible or gone to church or heard a sermon or listened to Billy Graham or anything like that. As a scientist, I became convinced there was a God simply by looking at the incredible complexity of human life, looking at the incredible complexity of the human body and saying, from a mathematical, scientific point of view, I've got to be honest, what they taught me in biology class about all of this happening by chance just doesn't make sense. There is no way all of this could happen by chance. There has got to be a God.
Although Lon now believed in God as a high school student, he had not yet become a Christian. Being interested in science, he went on to college and became a successful chemistry student. However, while a college student, he explored other religions and lifestyles and also became a drug dealer. This is a clip of Lon Solomon, in his own words, describing his conversion to to Christianity.
Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Brent.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
First of all, tell me a little bit about your story. You're a Jew.
I am.
You're a college student.
Right.
What was your life like?
Well, when I went to college, things were pretty good. And then I began looking around for meaning and purpose in life and did all the things that they say you're supposed to do. Joined a social fraternity, began drinking and partying, and did well in school. And my life was just empty. And so then I got deeply involved in drugs and went to the original Woodstock, 1969. And
Really?
Yeah, was there. I'm one of the few people that actually bought a ticket. I did. I wish I had it today. And but even in the drug culture, which was supposed to enlighten you and give you meaning and purpose, it didn't really work. And I went even back to religion, looking both in Eastern religions and in Judaism. But at the end of that whole process, which lasted 4 or 5 years, I was just empty. And I didn't even know why I was getting up in the morning. And then I met a street.
You were selling the stuff?
We were smuggling dope in from Amsterdam, and we were cutting it up and selling it, mostly hashish. I put myself through the last couple of years of school selling dope. And using it, I used a lot of my own dope. I didn't make that much money because I used too much of my own dope. And but anyway, just really not doing well. And I met a street preacher in 1970 in Chapel Hill.
Well, you were walking down the street?
Walking down the street, tripped out on LSD that day, and he was handing out broadsides, tracts about Christ.
What did he look like?
45-year-old man with a beard and just looked kind of normal. And he had this Econoline van that he drove into town with Bible verses written all over the side. And I passed him. My dog got into a dog fight right in front of him, and he helped me pull the dogs apart. And there I was, like as close as I am to you now, eyeball to eyeball with this guy. And he, you know, all I can tell you is when I looked into his eyes, I knew he had what I was looking for. And so I made a point over the next several weeks to come back and talk to him some more. And make a long story short, he began telling me about Jesus Christ. Now, I was born and raised Jewish. Had never heard, I mean, I knew Jesus died on a cross, but if you'd offered me $1 million, I couldn't have told you why. And he challenged me. He said, have you ever read the Bible? I said, no. Have you ever read the New Testament? I said, no. He said, well, how do you know Jesus Christ can't be the Messiah of Israel? And I said, well, I don't know. So I was a chemistry major. So he was very clever. He said to me, well, if you're a chemistry major, you know the scientific method, don't you? And I went, well, yeah. You know, you collect the facts, you examine the facts, you make a conclusion. He said, well, how can you make a conclusion about Jesus? You haven't collected the facts or analyzed the facts yet. And it made sense. So he challenged me, and I started reading the New Testament. Never read it before in my life.
You'd read the Old Testament?
No, I'd never read the Old Testament either. Never read the Bible. And as I began reading, I began saying to myself, you know what? This guy, Jesus, might just really be who he said he was. And I got to Matthew chapter 11, where Jesus says, come to me, all you who are burdened and heavy laden, and which I was, and I'll give you rest. You'll find peace for your soul. And I remember saying, bingo, that's exactly me. And maybe this Jesus can really do it. So I got down on my knees and I said, you know, God, I don't even know if you're real. And this Jesus character I'm really confused about. But my life is worthless. And if you can give me peace and give me rest and make it worth living, you can have it, because it's not worth much to me. So I said, I'll tell you what I'll do.
You said it's not, your life was not worth...
Not worth much to me.
You were talking about ending it? Thinking about ending it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't even know why I was getting up in the morning. I had no reason why I was alive. I'd lost all hope of ever finding any meaning or purpose in life. I'd tried everything I could think of. And I basically was just saying, you know, I don't see why you go on. Why should I have a family? Work for 40 years, you know, retire. I mean, let's just end it now. And I really was thinking about that.
So what happened?
Well, I got on my knees and I said, now, God, I'm going to give you my life for a month. That's what that man had told me to do. I didn't have his phone number. I didn't know a Christian in the world. I mean, you know, I'm a drug dealer. I don't know people that carry Bibles around. And I said, well, I'm going to give you my life for a month. And at the end of that month, if you haven't proved to me that you can make my life worth living, I reserve the right to take my life back. But if you prove to me that you can make my life worth living, you can have it for good. Amen. Now, that wasn't the greatest salvation prayer ever made, but, you know, there's a great verse in the Bible, Britt, that says, man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. And I think God looked on my heart and said, Solomon, that's the worst salvation prayer I've ever heard in my life. But your heart's right, and I'm going to honor that. And, you know, all I can tell you is if a person knows Jesus in a real and personal way, they know what happened next. He moved into my life. And I mean, in a couple of weeks, I just knew something had happened to me that had never happened before. And I went back and said, Lord, deal's a deal. I don't know what you're going to do with a hippie with long hair and love beads and motorcycle boots, but here I am. I'm yours. And that was almost 35 years ago.
And at that time, I take it that picture that we're showing on the screen right now was what you really looked like.
That is what I really look like. That's an actual picture from the time.
And how long was it before that life and the appearance that it depicts went away?
Well, after I came to Christ, which was the spring of 1971, the man who led me to Christ challenged me to get out of Chapel Hill. He said, you know, this is just a bad town for you. All your old drinking buddies, drug buddies, girlfriends are here.
So where'd you go?
So I started hitchhiking around the country with my dog. And just, I'd always wanted to do it, and I'd always been afraid.
You had a few bucks in your pocket still?
I had nothing.
Oh, you had nothing?
I was broke. Absolutely. Everything I owned was in a knapsack on my back. Half of that was my dog's.
Really?
Yeah, with his food and everything. So I just hitchhiked around the road, took an odd job here or there, and had some fun doing that. I mean, this was this was a different world back then.
It was.
And then I came to Washington in the fall of 1971, and a man named Bob Porter, who was an ex-alcoholic who had come to Christ and was doing street witnessing down in Alexandria, Virginia, picked me up and kind of mentored me, and I've been here ever since.